It is the first model introduced in the 2025 Gear Fighter Dendoh collaboration with Meteorot S, sporting the likeness of the iconic model of the series' namesake. This is GFD00 Gear Dendoh, with a kit of Giga Gatling, Power Sword, Power Hammer, Biped Legs, and the leg ability of Unshakable, which buffs the leg's resist stats while in heating phase. Now, this is actually the first time in a pretty hot minute at time of recording that a collaboration has been generous enough to not only announce another major mecha series from the early thousands, but on top of that also announce a freebie welfare model that will be handed out alongside it. So not every model in this collaboration is gacha only. And honestly, given the stat spread across the board, this one will be probably one of the most generous yet, with a very solid and very overly powerful base kit that can fit in just about anywhere as the team's DPS. Giga Gatling on the head part is a shooting skill that has a lot of very unique caveats to it, but if all those caveats are met, make it an extremely dangerous and highly potent shooting attack. The first of which is that it gets a times 1.5 damage bonus as long as the user's legs remain intact. So this means that as long as Gear Dendoh stays fairly healthy and doesn't have anything broken too easily, he already gets a 50% damage bonus right off the top before he fires even a single bullet. Furthermore, Giga Gatling also has another added bonus of Defense Ignore, which means that not only are you going to be hitting notably harder with a damage plus, but you're also going to be outright bypassing any of the enemy's resistances as they try to reduce incoming damage from you. So this is already going to be hitting extremely hard, given also the fact that this is a scatter skill, which means it'll damage one part normally and then two others randomly for extra damage. The only thing to really pay attention to and be wary of, however, is the fact that Giga Gatling also has a no dodge and no defend penalty on cooldown. So this will leave Gear Dendoh very widely open to punishment while he's in his cooldown if anything catches him in the backside, or if any defenders are caught slacking and something gets through. Power Sword on the right arm is a conventional melee skill that gets a times 1.5 damage bonus as long as Gear Dendoh's legs remain intact. So much like Giga Gatling, it is going to be very heavily reliant on him staying fairly healthy and his legs staying in the game as much as possible to keep your damage up. And already given the fact that he has a very decent base damage at over 1400, adding an extra 50% of that means it's already going to be fairly solid when that strike goes to go in. And with a fairly decent heating and cooling at 623 and 512, it's actually not too bad for the kind of power that he's bringing to the table. And a success stat of 1100 means that he's not going to be dodged or grazed as easily as one may think. So a lot of his attacks from this are going to be fairly consistently landing when choosing to use this. Power Hammer on the left arm is another conventional melee skill that is a full AoE type of attack. So this means that it will be spreading the damage across all parts equally based on how healthy the target is. However, if the enemy is intercepting Power Hammer with a shield, naturally, or if they have a conceal effect active, it will sponge all the damage to the one part tanking the blow. However, much like Power Sword, Power Hammer also gets a times 1.5 damage bonus as long as Gear Dendoh's legs remain on the field and active. So ultimately a very solid synergy and very heavy requirement here that if Gear Dendoh is going to be used, he needs to stay as healthy as possible and its few hits actually landing on him. Albeit, given that Power Sword and Power Hammer are just a little safer to use than Giga Gatling, it does mean that it still is going to be very reliant on keeping his legs as healthy as possible. Or just in general remaining as healthy and as untouched as possible, which means a defender on the team to keep all the hits off of him will be kind of necessary. As far as leg stats are concerned, Gear Dendoh is actually pretty solidly well-rounded in that department. A base mobility of 779 is a nice little sweet spot where you want to sit as far as leg mobility is concerned before any real terrain compatibility or mobility bonuses come into play. An evade of 514 is definitely not great though, as this means he will not be dodging or grazing fairly consistently, if at all, while he's on the field. But given that he is triple heavy with a very solid emphasis on DPS, I think dodging is going to be kind of the least of his concerns. However, he does make up for it with a pretty solid base melee resist at 1349, and a pretty middle-of-the-road sweet spot you want to sit in with your shoot resist at just over 1000. So he's got some pretty decent bulk up to it, already off to a good start, and that's not touching before Unshakable comes into effect, which will boost his resist stats just a little bit higher anytime he's caught in heating phase. Now in cooling phase, that's different, but if he's facing the enemy when taking the hit, it will be just a little bit better on the damage reduction. In the armor department, he's packing about 4,200 for the head, about 3,779 per arm, and just shy of 3,900 for the legs. So again, not only is he decently bulky in the resist department before Unshakable, but he's also got some good HP pools to help keep his damage as low as possible and keep him as healthy as possible if he does end up having to take a hit or two. All this being said, though, as a pure set score, honestly, I have to rate Gear Dendoh a pretty solid 7 out of 10. He's fairly synergetic in what he brings to the board, and as a welfare model of a collaboration, he's got some pretty good numbers. Some good mobility, very solid bulk, pretty decent resist stats, especially when Unshakable kicks in, and all of his attacks can hit fairly hard if used correctly. However, just a couple of conditions to be wary of that may make using Gear Dendoh kind of more of a liability or a potential risk. The first of which is that Giga, Gatling, and Power Hammer both have success stats under 1000. Power Hammer in particular at a base success of 503. So this means that these are going to be very easily dodged or grazed by the incoming enemy taking the hit, and it's going to keep his overall damage really shaky between both of those, especially given that even if they are going to have some very solid base damage, that really doesn't matter if the enemy is going to continue dodging or grazing you. And Power Sword being the only thing over 1000, and especially at 1100 for his success, means that that's going to be his most consistent form of attack anytime he's on the field. Additionally, if the enemy catches Gear Dendoh in his cooldown phase, Unshakable does nothing to help him with keeping that damage low and try to keep him as healthy as possible. Additionally, given that he is also triple heavy, means that anyone that is using a gravity type skill will be absolutely hammering him. As mixed parts though, I do have to rate him just a little bit higher at a 7.5 out of 10 for these same reasons. Given that even though he is hella blind with Giga, Gatling, and Power Hammer, he still does have a number of fairly solid attacks and good bulk that are used to him. And even if the success stats on the aforementioned skills are fairly low, if you are able to catch an enemy in a no-dodge state, that doesn't even matter anymore, thankfully. And biped legs with triple heavy support are something you can generally never go wrong with anyway. And with Unshakable there, anytime you're caught in heating phase, guarantees that you're going to be taking damage just a little bit less than you were originally intended to.